Will now come to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Henderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Gregory, Representatives Bangert, Brown, Haley, Hurlbert, Lewis, Person, Railsback, Sharp, Thompson, Walsh-Moore,
Present.
Young.
Okay, with 8 being present, we have established a quorum, and we will now go into executive session. I move that House Bill 2625, sponsored by Representative Berger, be voted do pass. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Henderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregory, Representatives Bangert, Brown, Haley, Hurlbert, Lewis, Person, Railsback, Sharp, Thompson, Walsh-Moore,
Aye.
Young, Hurlbert.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
2625 do pass. I now move that House Bill 2190, sponsored by Representative Henderson, myself, be voted do pass, and I'll open the discussion. This is the original underlying bill. After spending that last week, we held on to it, and spending this weekend working on it and looking at it, because I did not want to move the bill forward if I thought it would create problems. All we're trying to do is get more kids out into the workforce and give them a chance to work. And we're going to take the original bill through. I think at this point it does do what we intended. I've talked with both the chambers and with several attorneys. So at this point, I'd open up for any other discussion, but we're going to move the original underlying bill forward. Any discussion? Yes, Representative Walsh-Moore.
So the original underlying bill lays the business itself immune, correct? But it doesn't say if they are immune, who is responsible.
Well, what it does is this. If the schools to participate in this would have to take out a policy with music, a rider that would cover, and I need to get the underlying portion, the portion on the bill that says that if the student was clearly negligent, but it doesn't take the business out from their end of it. So let's go back to some of the things such as if they're not meeting OSHA guidelines, if they're not doing the things that they're supposed to do as a business, they haven't taken care of the things to keep that business safe, they are not immune from that. They're only immune from things from the student. Say you've got a 17-year-old student in there who does something kind of silly, something happens, then that would first go to the policy that music, who insures most of schools, would go to that first. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so it would, basically I want to avoid that it comes back on the student's parents, is what I
No,
want
it does not. Music would have to have a rider for them to move forward in this.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And actually, right now, that could happen at times because we've already got students going out in the workplace. In my area, I know for sure, we have lots of students. The businesses have just said, we're going to move it forward because we don't have workers. And they're bringing some of them forward. We had a meeting the other day where they took on 3 students, the businesses, and it was a welding company. And so some of this is going on. We would like to maybe encourage more of it, is the intent of the bill.
Okay, so this won't come back on like the parents of the student or the student themselves.
Well, I don't know if we
don't
can ever
wisely.
say that it could never come back on them under any circumstances, because this is the law, but
Fair.
the intention is to take that away from them.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Young.
Thank you, to inquire. So this will address section, I guess that's line 14, section 2,
Let me look at it.
the
Line 14.
an employer who accepts a secondary school student in a work-based learning program shall not be subject to civil liability for any claim arising from the student's negligent act or omission. So this
That is
would
correct. If
address
the student
that.
is negligent, that is correct.
And I think there was also, if I recollect correctly, a question about immunity.
That is correct. I think the organization MATA had a disagreement on what we're doing with that language, and that's why I didn't exec it last week. And I spent about a week and a half trying to talk with different attorneys and different people in that field. And at the end of the day, I felt like we were going forward with the original language, and I think it does what we intended. I think there will always maybe be a disagreement there on that. I don't think we could come to a full agreement on that, but I think Bill does what we're intending to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Henderson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregory. Representatives Bangert. Brown. Haley. Hurlbert. Lewis.
Aye.
Person. Railsback. Sharp. Thompson. Walsh Moore.
No.
Young.
Okay, by your vote of 8 ayes and 2 noes, you have voted House Bill 2625 do pass. We will now hold a hearing on House Bill 2631, sponsored by Representative Caberlo. Representative, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Committee, for allowing me to be here today. Representative Caberlo, 125th District, St. Clair, Hickory, parts of Benton, and parts of Cedar County in west central Missouri. This bill just kind of come up from my own thoughts, and as we get into it, you can maybe figure that out here in a little bit. Some of it may need some more thoughts to it over the weekend as I got some letters about this. But almost 2 years ago this time, when the pandemic started, and it come around that, and as I'll go step back a minute, I own a small business, have a restaurant in a small town in west central Missouri, also operate a corn maze. So in 2020, when they come around and said, with this pandemic, and said, you know, my local person come, and their local person, as in the health department, said we had to close our doors and could only do delivery and curbside pickup. Well, as a small business owner, I was told many years ago, when you own your own business, you really just own your own job. You know, you got to go there, you got to work every day if you're going to make a living at it. And when this come around and these things started happening, I'm like, oh gosh, you know, what's going to happen? How long can we stand this? Because at that point, none of us knew what was going on. So that lasted for 2 weeks that I couldn't let people in my restaurant, and my business went down 75%. I was doing 25% of what I normally did. Most of my workers still worked. A few of them didn't because I just didn't need everybody at that point. So, but after the 2 weeks, then it picked up and I started doing about 50%. But even at 50%, a business cannot last too long. So it was, and again, I understood it because we just didn't know what was going on. But then after things kind of went for a month or two, and I feel fortunate in Missouri that the governor we had, he didn't just close us all down and didn't put a bunch of mandates on us, that I still survived. And it took about 6 weeks for me to get back up to normal, normal of what I was doing. But what really made me think about this was, because if I'd have been at 25% for 6 weeks, it would have been a bad deal. The PPP helped when the federal government come along, and I think that should have been, if they're going to tell us to close and we can't pay our employees, it's kind of a good thing to pay them. And I did partake in that, and I did pay my employees, and they all worked their normal times. We did some painting inside the restaurant just because we wasn't as busy as before, but we did some things in cleaning that we don't normally get done. But they did get paid, and I was thankful for that. But I remember last year setting, and I don't know if it was this committee, and it might have very well have been, But I remember the two gentlemen from St. Louis that had a restaurant/bar along somewhere in the vicinity of the stadiums. And this was a year at that point, and they were still closed down by their local health department. And I'm not sure how that panned out, but to close somebody down for a year, you're looking to bankrupt them more than likely. And it's like, my thought was, what can we do for small businesses to alleviate this thing if it ever happens again? And in the bill, if you will read, it just says at the bottom in section 2, it says the pay of an elected official who orders the unauthorized closure of a private business. And I'll stop there for just a second. I'm not trying to circumvent anything that's in law now that deals with health departments. They come in at least once a year, sometimes twice a year into my restaurant, and they check the temperatures of my refrigerators and freezers and what my food temperatures are. I'm not trying to circumvent any of that. I understand we have to have all that. But when a pandemic comes around, or if another one ever comes around and we're in it, that I think something needs to happen besides just one person in the county, or whether it be the state legislator or whether it be the county commissioners. But normally it went all the way down to the health department officer, whoever it was in that county. And some counties are different, so it was whoever it was in that county. But normally it was somebody on the county level. And it just says that any elected official who orders the unauthorized closure of a private business in order to prevent or limit the spread of a contagious disease during a pandemic or address any other public concern shall be suspended for the length of the business's closures. I think it was easy for them to do that. It was easy for some health department official to say, we're going to close you down. And they still get their paycheck on Friday. If they don't get their paycheck on Friday, they're going to look at that a little bit closer and say, should they be closed down? I did lots of things different, and it wasn't that we was just ignoring the pandemic. We did lots of things different in our restaurants. We seated at half tables. We, besides just wiping the table off with bleach Clorox water, then we also sprayed it with a disinfectant, and so we did things. And I knew I had to do that if people was going to come in my restaurant and want to stay safe and feel safe at that time. So it's not like we're trying to be bad people. It's just that we feel like we know what we can do, and we have to do what we can do to keep our business afloat. And I just think if they had skin in the game, as a lot of people will call it, if they knew that whoever that was in St. Louis that closed that business for a year, if they wasn't getting their paycheck for a month or 2 or 3, I think that situation would have been a little bit different. It's pretty simple. That states that. Friday, I got an email from Ismail, I believe, that's sitting up there with this and says this might be challenged in court, and maybe so. She talked like because it says where if they have that. If they're elected there and then you say you're in there and you get paid for that, well, it's like, I think if we have another statute in law that says if you do certain things then you don't get paid, I'm not sure where that falls, but maybe we could change some wording. Maybe it needs to have a committee substitute for wording, because as where she stated where we didn't put elected officials in there, but it's those elected officials that we have to, that's going to make that determination. It's not some non-elected officials. So that may need to be something to look at, but I would be willing to look at that. But I just feel that would be important if they would have to forfeit some of their money for that too as well, then things would be looked at differently. So I would be more than happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Any discussion? Representative Lewis, proceed.
Appreciate you bringing this forward. I think we all know of instances and situations. It is a tough, I think we all, just irrespective of which side of the aisle we sit on, we know this has been tough, that people are out of job. And I know what you're looking for is to hold people accountable. I don't exactly know, I think something like this would probably be challenged in court. But you know what? Maybe that's exactly what we need to do, because we need for some clarification. I think some of the other legislation that we've already passed and we see on the floor going over, they're probably going to get challenged in court too. And that's probably good, because we need to, we need to probably have it challenged in court, because we need to get some clarification. And anything that we can put in statute that gives you a leg, gives the homeowner. I'm looking for individuals to have rights. Not necessarily your business, but you as an individual, I want you to have rights. And I'm not concerned as much with, pushing forth language, language that protects a business, but I do want to protect the business owner. I want to protect an individual. The Bill of Rights was about individuals' rights. And
Exactly.
and I want you to have those rights. I want me as a worker to have those rights. I want those other people to have rights. And whether it's an elected official, and see, I'm not sure it's always an elected official that was closing it. I think sometimes it was the director of the health department who wasn't an elected official, who may be responding to a series of board members who were elected, but that person wasn't elected. So I don't know. There may be other things we have to.
I know some counties are like that. They have an elected health board, and then they hire a president or whatever to run that health department. So that's true.
I'm with you on the intent. There are probably some things that we have to, as you know, really need to work through and tweak to make it as good as it can be. But I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Representative Walsh Moore, proceed.
Thank you. I appreciate the spirit of this bill. I do. I understand what's happening. I do have a few questions about the unauthorized closure. Unauthorized by whom? The governor basically gave everyone a free pass to do what they want. So all the closures were, in a sense, authorized, unless I'm misunderstanding something.
Well, the unauthorized would be that, and not that it was unauthorized. Well, I don't know if unauthorized is the right word, but it would come down to that local health board person that decided, that said, hey, you can't open your business and you can't have anybody in there. I think that's real easy for them to do that when nothing happens to them. That business owner is losing. If they're not open, they're losing money every day. That person that said you can't be open, they're not losing money every day. So it's easy for them to say that and do that. Let that business owner make that choice.
And I understand what you're saying. I have to say I vehemently disagree that they just walked away. I don't think any health department in this state just walked away unscathed and went about their normal life during the pandemic. Everyone.
No, but they still got their paycheck.
They may still have gotten their paycheck, but that's because in addition, they weren't just walking around shutting down small businesses. They also had quite a bit of work to do on that we had to roll out the testing. We had to roll out all kinds of, for the immunizations. I mean, the health departments weren't just sitting at home, shutting everyone else down and collecting a paycheck.
I understand.
Which I don't think they were just vindictively going out and shutting everyone around and then going off and playing golf. I mean, they still had quite a bit of work to do. And so I understand the spirit. I know small business. My father's a small business owner. He was affected by this. I understand the spirit of what you're doing. I do. I know that it was rough on everyone, as we've said.
Sure.
This was a really, but I don't see how handcuffing the health department is going to help anyone in the long run. I just really don't see how that's productive.
Thank you.
I'm going to kind of help you a little bit on that unauthorized. I think we passed a bill in here that said that no longer can just the health department, but it has to go to the highest elected officials, if I remember correctly. And so a health director no longer can shut you down unless it was approved by the highest elected officials, i.e. on the county commissioners on the county level, and in St. Louis County, I guess it would be the county, or the board. I think the board, the highest elected body, so it'd have to be the board. So it would be unauthorized if they tried to shut them down, I think is what it would be if it didn't go first to the highest elected board over that area. So that may be where you're going with that. So I just wanted to mention that. And Representative Banger, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to inquire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just have a couple questions for you. When the pandemic started, were you scared at all?
Absolutely. Sure.
I was terrified. I was one of those folks that washed my groceries when they came home from the grocery store. You know, wore a double mask, didn't touch anything, was afraid to get near anyone because I didn't know what this thing was about. It was terrifying. And as we went along through the process, we started to learn more and more about what the COVID was, how it was spread, those types of things. And throughout that whole process, we kind of changed things. You know, all of a sudden now you could go get food from a restaurant because in the beginning you couldn't.
Right.
And I know it affected our restaurants. I have a close friend who has a restaurant in St. Louis County, which were closed down for months and months and months. So you were fortunate that you were only 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And what we did in our community is we rallied around our restaurants and we didn't want to see them close. So they actually did pretty well with their pickup business because we were coming there and purchasing food from them and alcoholic drinks, which they made a fortune off of that, especially the margaritas. So anyway, that's, you know, we learned throughout the process, you know, what this whole thing was about. And now we're actually in St. Louis County today on a no mask mandate as of today. So my question to you is, if you're a mayor of a town and your people are dying because of a disease and your health department is coming to you and saying, we need to shut stuff down. We need to shut things down. People are dying. What are you going to do as that mayor?
I think you can warn the people and inform the people of what's going on, but I don't think you should have the right to close a small business of anybody's.
So if you're a mayor of that town and your health director is telling you your residents are dying, you're not going to tell them that they need to shut things down.
I'm going to tell the people of my city however I can, in what ways I can, of what's going on. And here's what's going on. People's dying. This is happening. But I'm not going to tell an individual to close their business down.
So you're going to let your people die.
I'm going to inform them what's going on, and they can make their choices.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Young, please proceed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think I want to piggyback off of what Representative Bangert said. So you mentioned that in that scenario, or she mentioned in that scenario, the citizens were coming and informing the mayor of the issue at hand. And I think your response was, well, I would just warn them and forewarn them. And they were coming to the mayor to inform the mayor of the issues at hand, and perhaps thought it might be best that some of those businesses be shut down. I think, but isn't that what emergency powers are for? When there's a pandemic or perhaps even a natural disaster or, God forbid, war or something of that nature, that those elected officials have the authority, and often it's based on their responses are usually based on a lot of counsel, advisors. But isn't that what those sort of emergency powers are for? To
I think you're probably right. I think in this where this all stemmed from was it just kept going and going and going. In the instance of the one in St. Louis, where it was over a year and they still had them closed down, and it didn't need to be. And so I think that, in my opinion, I don't think it needed to be.
Yeah.
It's like nobody made people go into that restaurant, but if the people wanted to open their restaurant, they could do that.
I kind of think it's just characteristic of a novel sort of a virus pandemic is what we were going through. Nobody really knew
Sure.
a whole lot about how this would impact or affect us as a whole. And matter of fact, I think at this point we don't know how many lives were saved because of it. But we do know that there were, about 900,000, we're about 950,000 nationwide deaths. So we know there were a lot of lives lost. And in Missouri, I think it's 14,000 or so Missourians that lives were lost. And my brother-in-law and 3 cousins of mine are in that number. So I think, erring on the side of caution is to me, the preferred way to go, especially if you had a lot of counsel and advisors and statistics that are building. I don't know that I can support the bill as written for several reasons that has been mentioned already. Perhaps with more work, but not as it's written now.
Thank you.
Representative Railsback.
To comment and to acquire,
Proceed.
we all know at that time, there was a lot of panic, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of concern. The schools didn't know what to do either. We were in uncharted territory. But my simple question is, you have a restaurant and it was shut down. Was the grocery store in town shut down?
No, it was not.
Thank you.
Representative Walshmore.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you. I think the point, like I said, I understand where you're going with this, and I do get what you're saying. But the problem arises from, you talked about your freedoms as the business owner. Well, let's say I'm a waitress in your restaurant. Sounds like you would have stayed open and done what you could to protect your people, and that's well and good. But not everyone's going to do that. And so what do I do as a waitress? And I have a 2-month-old son now. I mean, I'm a young mom with an infant who isn't, who is at risk of catching everything. So I don't want to go to work in your restaurant. But without the government shutdown and the PPE being available, it's too bad. I have a son to feed. So I have to go. So actually, I don't have a choice. You're taking away my choice because that's my job. And if I don't show up to waitress in your restaurant, I don't have an option. I have nothing else to do.
All right. I think that's a characteristic of a bad apple. I worked with my wait staff and said, if you don't feel comfortable, you do not have to be here. And I probably would have paid the PPE to them.
That's great, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we make laws to protect against bad apples.
Sure.
That's the only reason we have any laws,
And,
is to protect against bad apples.
Right. And I guess at some point you would have to make that decision of, well, do I continue to work there or do I not? So, and I understand what you're saying, where you might not have been paid, where that's, if you didn't want to go back to work there, but then you would have felt like I felt and not getting paid, because that's how I was. I wasn't getting paid if I wasn't open. So.
But you did receive PPE. There was.
But that wasn't for me. That wasn't. I mean, I paid my employees all that. As a business owner, I received none. I still had to make money, or I wasn't going to make money. The PPE was not for the business owner itself. It was for all my employees.
Well, then maybe that's the issue we should be addressing.
And
how
that
we
would
address
sure,
that.
sure,
Because
yeah.
I just don't see another pandemic. We understand is coming. And even if it doesn't, let's leave something that makes sense. And we can all learn from this. And yeah, maybe we didn't get it right the first time.
Right.
And we learned, we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. The learning curve has been, it's been at a whiplash
sharp,
pace.
yep.
So maybe that's not what we get, but maybe that's what we address, not handcuffing
be
health
as well.
departments. Maybe
Right.
that's the issue we look at. Thank you.
Representative Hurlburt, proceed.
Thank you, to inquire. So we've gone from the bill that's in front of us, and we've kind of gone down a trail on emergency powers, and just where did that lead us to, and why you're filing this bill in response to now. So we have, as we're having this discussion on emergency powers, I think we can all agree that there was sometimes when the emergency powers were overdone, that we had officials going too far. That's why we passed bills out last session to kind of outline what many of us already thought was in statute, that only those elected officials could order, or those highest level legislative bodies be the ones that order any shutdowns that way. But it also brings down to, where does that responsibility lie? I mean, does the government have the responsibility to tell you, who they've already approved as a small business, that no, you cannot earn a living anymore? No, you cannot pay your wait staff and actually bring in income and help your community out. And I just think that is fundamentally, it comes down to a personal decision there. And that's what you were kind of insinuating there, that it really is the business owner's decision. It's not the government's responsibility to mandate a closure. I wholeheartedly agree with the heart of this bill that that decision should be made by the local business owner and not some overbearing small government. So thank you for bringing this bill up.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a comment. Representative, I love the spirit of this. I remember preparing my taxes in December of 2019 as this was coming on, and it was being talked about on CNN in China. And I started going, well, this is really interesting. I know we've got a lot of trade and travel going back and forth. I said, it's just going to be a matter of time before it ends up here. And sure enough, February, March timeframe, here we are. I know I changed some of my daily habits a little bit. You know, maybe I didn't stand as close to someone when I was talking with them. I made sure to wash my hands a little more often than what I probably usually did because I'm a farmer and I've probably digested more foreign matter than what anyone could imagine. You know, you're out working cattle and you get a piece of pizza and you just don't even think about it, right? Do you believe in personal choice and responsibility?
Absolutely.
So if I'm feeling safe or if I feel like I am safe enough to go somewhere in the midst of a pandemic, do you think I should have that responsibility to do so?
I believe you should.
I saw a picture this morning of a gentleman in Ukraine with tanks on the street riding his bicycle down the middle of the road like he didn't have a care in the world in the middle of a war zone, when many people might be saying, you're absolutely crazy for doing that. Just like I was told I was absolutely crazy for buying a Payday candy bar and eating a thing while I was walking out of the store in April of 2020. So I love the health of this bill. I love where it's intended to go to. I'm a strong believer in personal choice. So I had no problem with people wanting to wear masks. I had no problem with people wanting to wear gloves. I had no problem with people wanting to order curbside. But I do believe that with you as a business owner and personal choice and choices to make, that it was your call, and then to work with your employees to, if they don't feel safe, then okay, that's fine. Let's make a concession for you. So I do like where this is heading. I'd be curious to see where we end up with in a final product, but I think personal responsibility in this day and age goes a long way. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to move on to witnesses. Are there any witnesses in support of this bill? Okay, witnesses in opposition? All right, then anyone here for informational purposes only? Well, that's short and sweet. So with that, this will conclude the hearing on this bill and the workforce development. Thank you.